Hi, I'm Lenara Verley, and I research art and technology for quite a while, and more recently I've been researching the specific technology of money. And today I'm going to talk about commons financing for art and intellectual commons. So culture is the commons. And when we talk about common goods, we have on the other corner of the spectrum private goods. And for example, intellectual property and copyright restrictions. But is copyright a good funding model? It works great for publishers, but not really good for the artists. Maybe just a tiny, minuscule percentage of artists can be supported financially by copyright. And now that intellectual goods and culture can be disseminated digitally, they don't have this scarcity quality associated with physical goods. So what kind of funding can be designed for this model of digital culture? So what are the emerging funding platforms that we have now? There are several of them, and with different models and different ideas, and some are more well-known than others, and I'm going to bring you some examples right now. That goes from crowdfunding, which I think is one of the most known platforms for funding, and patronage. Also, I'm going to talk about rare digital art market, and that's kind of new. Not many people heard about this. I'm going to talk about the Art Foundation for the People, which actually doesn't exist yet, and a little bit of what are the trends and possible goals for the future in this realm. So first, crowdfunding. One example that I'm bringing today is about an art exhibition in Brazil. And it was an art exhibition with big names at a cultural institution. But what happened in this particular case was that it became a target of a right-wing group's defamatory campaign. And then the private sponsor, which was a bank, decided to just abruptly close the exhibition, which made it shift to this crowdfunding model. And they used the Brazilian platform Benfeitoria, which means benefactory. And one of the interesting things of this platform is that they don't have a minimum of mandatory fee. They just leave this value open. So to be decided by the project team and also for each contributor to choose. And they ended up raising quite a lot of money. It was actually a record for Brazilian crowdfunding projects. And the curator, he considered in this case, crowdfunding was a way for the society to make a political stance. And he sees this type of funding as a separate voice that can enter the landscape and counterpoint the public and private institutions that currently finance art. Another example is the platform, the Spanish platform Goteo, and they have a big emphasis on the commons. So all projects are released with a Creative Commons license, and also both the contributions and rewards, they go beyond just exchanging money for products. And even the software for the platform itself is released as a Creative Commons license. And one thing they have, and is also a growing characteristic of many platforms, is the match funding. So how this works is that besides the individual contributors, they also have funds coming from public and private institutions, and they can be earmarked, for example, for specific goals or for geographic regions, and then they match the money pledged by the contributors. Another example, and that I bring very quickly, is really focused on art projects. It's called the Hedge Fund, and they also have match funding from different institutions. They are non-profit, so in this case, instead of a fee, they have a mandatory minimum donation that they collect. And what they do is to kind of select the projects. They use other selection mechanisms. Let's say the artist receive an award or a grant or a fellowship. Another crowdfunding platform that is quite new, and actually you can't yet contribute to anything. The only project available is the platform itself. But they have some interesting ideas. They're called Snowdrift. And one of these ideas is to have as their supporting mechanism for themselves to be a crowdfunding campaign, instead of like a fee or a donation like we talked. And instead of match funding, they propose this thing called crowd matching, and so each pledge will actually raise all the other pledges for the same campaign, so it has a snowball effect. And also they are aimed not so much for a one-term thing, let's say an art exhibition, but for ongoing projects. So it's a long-term funding, and that is more aligned to this patronage model that is also another flavor of crowdfunding. So if the patronage, people pledge a monthly contribution to an author, and it also can be connected to a specific thing like a text or a video or music they produce. And they also use, a lot of them use the freemium model. That means that there are some things that are just published for free, but for their patrons they will have access to more like exclusive content, or maybe before the others they would have access. And this example is Professor Keen, which is a researcher in economics, and he says that eventually he will quit his job at university when his research will become fully funded by his patrons. It hasn't happened yet. So another possibility for funding comes from actually another place. It comes from the art market. So the rare digital art market is a relatively new phenomenon and one of the new applications of blockchain technology. So in the traditional art markets, we have owners exchanging a physical object, let's say a painting. At least in theory, they exchange a physical object, because many times this market, is a lot about speculation, and there are places, there are secure vaults and a special tax-free zones where they keep the art, and there's just some signatures on contracts and some money changing hands, and nobody actually sees this art. With digital art, we don't have an original object, so we don't have an object that can be locked in a secure vault in a tax-free zone. But with blockchain technology, you can have a cryptographic token associated with a digital file. So then you can actually buy this token, have all the transactions in the blockchain. And here, a very important phenomenon happens, is a new thing, that you are decoupling ownership with possession, or let's say exclusive access. When we decouple those things, we create a possibility for the market to finance the commons. Because why someone buys an artwork? And of course, having access to an item of beauty and significance, that's a very important factor. But with digital art, we know already that it's very, very hard to ensure exclusive access. But now with the exclusive token of ownership, we can have in this token other benefits of buying an artwork. So one of these other benefits, of course, is the monetary investment and speculation. But another one is the pride and good feelings of supporting an artist. There is also a status of being a collector and owning something exclusive, or maybe the aura associated with a rare and special artifact. But the important thing is that the artwork's digital file can still be freely copied and enjoyed by anybody. So that file belongs to the commons. So one example of a website that is using blockchain technology for art is Dada NYC. And they have a big thriving community of artists. They use tools that are embedded in the site to create works and also to collaborate with each other. And right now they already have some artwork for sale, like this picture here on the right. And I really like it. Actually, for me, it represents what happens when I first explain to people this concept of decoupling the ownership and the possession. So then their heads kind of explode in a crazy rainbow. So another feature that is possible with blockchain and smart contracts is to give artists part of the value their work acquires through speculation. So for every successive sale, the contract can specify that a percentage of the profits will always go to the artist back. And Dada is proposing that with the first sale of an artwork, 7% of the proceeds goes to the artist, and then 30% will go to the community. One of the ideas is that with this revenue, They want to reward artists that collaborate and also provide a basic dividends for all the artists in their community. So it's kind of like a basic income for artists. So that was a new possibility coming from the market. And another thing I want to talk is, how would an art foundation for the people look like? And that doesn't exist yet, but we have a little bit of like the beginnings of such an idea when we talked about how the crowdfunding platforms had the match funding and other institutions adding money to them, and how they also curated a little bit how the projects that they displayed. And we can expand and make this model much more complex and interesting. For example, right now each contributor have their own motivations for adding, but maybe they can get together for a common goal, let's say representation in art. And a foundation can be set up with a mission and a board and curators. Of course, they can accept contributions from all these other institutions and have a governance model that is based on a more of a direct democracy model. And then you can create a possibility for funding all kinds of different things in this way. And that's just one possible idea. I think if we look into this movement of a peer-to-peer transition and ways of funding for the arts based on the commons, there are several trends that I think are playing together and are going to shape this area. One of them is to guarantee the open access to culture and art, and also to incorporate open governance to all these models so they can have this participation from the people who are at the base of it. And then to gather the network effect, which is what we have with the technology and the networked world we have right now, where you can multiply and potentialize these initiatives instead of having just a single person, but create something that is greater than the sum of the parts. So those are some of the things that I think we should look for in the future and help create this future ourselves. And that was the presentation. If you want to get in touch with me, my email is lenara@coinspiration.org, and feel free to get in touch.